Now, when the police come, you will tell them exactly what you told me. Do you understand, Martha?
Yes, Mr. O'Neill.
And you too, Walter?
Yes, Father.
If you love listening to this show, please consider giving a rating and a review on Amazon Alexa or wherever you listen. We want to continue bringing you this amazing content, and part of our ability to do that means that we need a big audience. Now, it may not seem like much, but rating and reviewing the show will help more people find us, just like how you found this show. Simply on any podcast platform, search for a show, scroll down to the bottom, and push 5 stars. It's that easy. Thanks for supporting the show. Today I'm joined by Josh Poulsen, who's the Director of Product Development at House of Marley, a sustainably-minded consumer electronics company. Josh, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Scott.
All right, so what is House of Marley?
House of Marley is a audio and consumer electronics brand that was founded around the beliefs of Bob Marley, the pillars of Bob Marley, and taking care of the planet around music and one love. And so, we created a brand around creating audio products that were following those pillars. And one of the main pillars being sustainability and making sure our products are better for the planet than the sea of plastic is what we call the rest of the industry. So,
what a terrific legacy. And of course, who doesn't know Bob Marley and some of the, music that we've kind of grown up with.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So how is that legacy part of the organization? Is it a licensing model or
Yeah, we're licensing the family name. Of course, the Bob Marley family has a portfolio of licensees in different industries. Obviously, the discography and the music license and Tough Gong, where they do a lot of the Bob Marley branded T-shirts. They have a coffee license. They have apparel and other wear licenses, and then we license the rights to use the Marley name for consumer electronics and a few other accessories.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Now, when we think about audio equipment, there's a pretty wide spectrum, right? So, if you were to give our listeners a sense in terms of where you guys are in terms of very high-end premium elite audio equipment down to just everyday consumer things that we can purchase off Amazon. Where are you guys at in terms of that product fit?
Well, we believe that, sustainable options should be, attainable by, the general, public and the consumer. So we really range very broadly in price point all the way, from a $14.99 earbud all the way up to $400 big speaker sound system, right? So I'd say we tend to shine at that slightly premium space, but we do want to be attainable and have products that are in the lower price points for all consumers.
Yeah, so still very much in the kind of the mass market, with a little bit of premium footprint. Okay, yeah. Makes a lot of sense. So I know you guys are pretty big when it comes to sustainability. Can you talk about when we think about audio products, we don't necessarily immediately think about sustainability, but what are some of the aspects of your products and the way you guys do business that makes you guys sustainable?
So it's mainly, we believe materials matter. So I think where we start is with our materials. We use unique materials that you might find in more home decor or in more premium products. So we're using FSC certified wood. We're a licensee, so we can basically market the use of FSC certified wood in our products. And then, we're using a lot of recyclable materials like aluminum. That's highly recyclable, using our rewind fabric, which is made from kind of a blend of natural and synthetic recycled fibers. We're trying to bring in, upcycle a lot of goods to become a product that's has a really great quality, and quality in structure of build and performance, so that ultimately the product will have a longer life than your typical, products that you might only use for a year and then they break and then you have to replace them. So, we're trying to build products that last a long time. That's part of the sustainable effort. And then, where the materials are coming from, and then the processes and manufacturing process that we use, we're trying to be as smart as possible, and using like non-VOC coatings, things that are better for the environment, better for the water. And then on the back end of that, we're actually giving back. So we're actually, partnered with the One Tree Planted. So proceeds of our products are being donated to plant trees in global forests around the world. And we're trying to, pick areas that are, maybe in the limelight of needing some support. Also, because we're a global company, we try to plant trees in all regions where our products are sold. And so, we've got planting projects that, happened in California, North America, British Columbia, all the way to Africa, Europe, all over the globe. So we kind of hit it on 3 points, right? Where the materials are coming from, how we build our products as a good quality product, packaging being one highly sustainable area. We know that packaging tends to end up in the garbage, and so we want to make sure that packaging is fully recyclable, and we make it easy for the consumers to recycle. And then we also give back on the back end of our products sold.
All right, so let's get into some details. So, you're within the product development group, so you guys are clearly interfacing with the engineers. And, I think it's great to talk about sustainability, but let's talk about the science behind it.
Yeah.
The science of audio equipment, speakers as an example, there's a certain kind of optimal sense of resonance, vibration, soundproof, all these things that matter, and some of that gets into material science. So as you're thinking about, making some of these material science substitutes, how is that affecting the performance aspect? And what matters from a performance versus what is less material from a performance perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question. We obviously have to evaluate all the materials we use for their performance in our products. Wood is an amazing material, right? And it's used in a lot of musical instruments, and it can be very strong. It has great acoustic qualities. I'd say, in our application of wood, having a wood ear cup, is maybe different than having a plastic ear cup or a metal ear cup, right? And you get a different sound depending on the material you use. So we have to study that, sample and test. And sometimes, we have to use wood in a more decorative way, and then just a functional way. But typically, me being kind of a material nerd myself, and what I like to do is find out what the properties of the material have and how we can benefit, our products will benefit from those materials. We did use cork in our No Bounds speaker series that we launched a couple years ago at CES. And, what we found is cork being an amazing material for, dampening vibrations. It's buoyant. It has a lot of properties that actually benefit our products. And so we use them in our speakers as a dampening material. Although it was a decorative material as well, we found it actually added some dampening properties to the housings. So we were able to reduce the vibrations of where the product sits on the table, for instance. We use silicone. We found a way to blend our waste from the silicone molding, because silicone doesn't really melt. Once it's a thermoset material, you have to kind of use chemicals to bring it back to its base material to start over. So what we found is you could actually grind up the silicone into little particles and mix it with fresh silicone and a percentage of recycled or post-industrial waste. And we use silicone a lot, and silicone's a great dampening material, and also drop protection, and all those things. And so also with our fibers that we use in our rewind, we found it gives the product a nice premium feel, and the acoustic properties of the fabric that we study, and where we can use that on our speakers, for instance. So a lot of thought goes into the materials we use, not only from the sustainable standpoint, but how those materials will function within our products.
And just to be clear, I mean, there are certain things that just cannot be substituted easily, at least at this point, whether it's the magnet components, right? whether it's the actuators or the amplifiers or the electronic systems, mechanical components, those are not really fundamentally changing. We're really talking about the housing aspects, and a lot of it really what you're referring to is really not the core functionality, but more at the cosmetic, more the visual,
Correct.
and more supplemental or accessory kind of level.
Correct. Yeah, the mechanical enclosures. Yeah. There's some thought. We're looking at battery technologies, obviously, and as far as electronic components, there's not really much we can do. Right. We have to, because of our size. Well, we're not going to be developing a electronic component, right? Per se, like a bigger company could be able to do with their volumes, but we're taking off the shelf components. We're really doing all our innovation in the way we use those components in conjunction with our industrial design and our enclosures.
Yeah.
But
now, when you're working with natural products like cork or wood, for instance, because of the kind of uniqueness of each of those fibers or the materials, it is subject to variation from source input to input, right? And then so different types of source of let's say wood type is going to have a different vibration, dampening, or acoustic, all of these things. So can you go into a little bit of depth around for more of the natural elements? What do you guys look for? What do you guys tend to use, and what tends to have more consistency?
Yeah, that's a good question. I consider any natural material a living material, right? Being that it isn't a piece of injection plastic that has a spec or a dimension that won't change. We find that dimensionally, natural materials tend to change quite often with humidity, with obviously if you're going to use wood, solid wood, and it gets in a really dry environment, you can see cracking. So we have to kind of be very careful on how we engineer those materials into our products. You don't want to buy a solid wood walnut table, right, and take it into Arizona in that really high heat and dry weather. That's likely to crack unless it's been conditioned to not do so. And so we do take this into account. We do see a slight yield change when we do mass production with our products. And so there's sometimes where, wood component that is built, obviously it doesn't meet our spec. And so we try to be as quite a range of acceptance level. So we don't see a lot of waste, but there are, components we have to kind of hand select. And there's a craft involved in that, and how we process those materials. When you're milling wood, sometimes there's just a part of the wood that's weak and it will chip, right? And so those are all things that we look at and bring forward, and we try to do our best to prevent waste. But at least the natural material, can be recycled into, like, for instance, cork. We use agglomerated cork, so where you're not using the pure, the whole piece of the trunk or the bark of the tree that's peeled off, that they die cut cork for cork bottle tops out of. We take the waste of that process, or Asian cork, which is more B grade cork that they grind up into particulate. So what we can actually do is, if the part doesn't turn out, we can actually recycle that, regrind it up, and use it again. And so, same with a wood. If a wood piece is not going to work forward, it can be recycled into wood fiber that we actually use in a plastic that we put wood, sawdust, and other bamboo fibers into, to make a kind of a composite material we call regrind wood fiber composite or natural fiber composite plastic. And so there's ways for us to reuse the parts that we can't use in our products.
So I want to briefly talk about the shelf life or the durability of some of your products. So of course, like I said, something as small as like a earbud is going to have a much shorter shelf life than something like a larger speaker, premium speaker. I think it certainly, earbuds, those tend to kind of break down, and we end up having to have to change that out fairly quickly. But for speakers, they tend to last for a while. And I wonder what's kind of the average number of years that you see people holding on to it before they either decide to upgrade, update, or just, recycle or throw away.
I'd say a good range is between, probably 2, 3 to 5 years. somewhere in that range, I think, before people tend to upgrade. Obviously, we've had a speaker on the market that's been on the market for 9 years, and people are just discovering it and loving it. I think, Marley products would tend to live longer, and obviously the battery, having a finite life, right, in recharging. So it really depends on how frequently you use your product. But we test and use batteries that are industry standard that will last, 3+ years in use. And we're starting to think about ways to make our products more upgradable or repairable. The right to repair, regulations that are happening in Europe, being led by Europe, is changing our mindset on how we make our products more repairable. And some of our speakers, starting back a few years ago, you can actually replace the battery in it. And so if your battery does go bad, you can replace the battery and give that product some more life. And so those are things we're thinking about. But we feel that Marley products would live a longer life just because of the aesthetic that they have. And they look great in the home, and they may not get as much wear as a outdoor portable speaker would be out in the outdoors. So we want to make sure that we can repair our products in the future and make them last a little longer. But I'd say the average consumer on a speaker is probably 2 years to 5 years, depending on the model.
Yeah, so you were touching upon a perfect topic that I was hoping to cover, which is around this notion of component replacement. Mm-hmm. So you look at companies like GE, and again, a very different company product portfolio, and of course their shelf lives are much shorter because we're talking about light systems or light bulbs. So GE in particular recognize that there are certain components that can have a much longer life, whereas there are certain sections or components that can be swapped out easily. So instead of having to replace the entire system, we're replacing a component within that system. Now, the challenge with audio system is, there is, of course, just regular kind of a technology upgrade, update, new components that comes in. But then really the housing and some of those things tends to be, kind of still relatively good. So how do you reconcile the technology innovation and then how it actually fits within the housing that's kind of has this unique optimization versus a component update, replacement, and repair?
Yeah, I mean, in a way, you kind of have to think about from the beginning of the project and how to design your product to be a little more modular. Obviously, because of product that needs to be like waterproof, for instance, needs to be IP67 or IPX7 rated. It needs to be sealed mechanically. Nothing can get in, and so if you have an access panel that allows you to get in to replace a battery, for instance, that enclosure opening has to be sealed off to the rest of the product. Otherwise you see some damage. So we look at the use case of the product and we have to really plan that modularity from the beginning. And I think, there's been a lot of thought and a lot of pressure, I think, going forward for consumer electronics companies to make their products more repairable. And really you kind of have to start from the beginning. It can't be an afterthought, right? And so that's what we're working on going forward, is how to replace the components that may have a shorter life than the product itself.
And as a product manager myself, it's a lot easier said than done, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It just you can't necessarily foresee how those different components will change over time, and will still be compatible. And still fit and make sense. So there's just a host of issues that needs to be worked out, but certainly from philosophy, I think it's the right approach. I know that there was a topic around recycling in terms of packaging that we wanted to cover, but before that, I wanted to really ask around this, really the full value chain. Oftentimes what happens is large companies will tout, let's say, packaging as an example, but for sustainability to really truly be transformative, it has to happen across the value chain of an organization, from sourcing, from product development, from engineering to the actual manufacturing, to the supply chain logistics to the last mile. So can you talk about how sustainability is beyond just kind of lip service to really getting embedded to every functional and business unit within the House of Marley?
Yeah, it's a really big topic to cover. Starting with just the design and engineering, like I spoke before, you kind of have to make sure that you're keeping those those needs to be recyclable in mind at the very beginning of the project, all the way through. Of course, our sourcing, we're finding, some of the, be honest, we do produce our products in Asia, as most electronics companies do, but some of the woods, for instance, come from forests that are, half a world away, and that's chain of custody has to be captured in our FSC certification chain of custody that we manage. Everybody that touches that piece of wood has to be certified by FSC, and then for us to be certified as a product, and then we license the ability to market our product as FSC certified. So that chain of custody is a difficult thing to manage, right? And we have to do that with other materials as well, just to make sure they don't get tainted. When it comes to logistics and shipping, there's also trying to optimize a container load that has to go across the ocean, right? Trying to engineer our products. Obviously, packaging is very important to sell the product, but we're seeing with retail changing that maybe having a larger package is not necessarily the way to go, and you want to reduce the size of your product and your packaging so that you can fit more in a container, and get those efficiencies and reduce your carbon footprint that way, by getting more product into our warehouse in one container versus before, where we might have more marketing that needs to happen on a retail shelf, and therefore you give yourself a little more real estate in the packaging to be able to tell that story on shelf. That's becoming less important as we move to a more online e-commerce strategy as a globe, because of the pandemic. It's really opened a lot of people's eyes, I think, and has kind of forced that ahead of schedule. And I think that's kind of cool. Let's see what else. What topic did I not hit on? Design, engineering, logistics. Anything else you would like to know?
Absolutely. I think one of the question, and again, I recognize that you or the organization may not have a set course per se, but certainly there's a general movement towards local manufacturing for a number of reasons. Certainly when it comes to more critical supplies and goods, having domestic or local access is very important. But just from a decarbonization, because of just the supply chain, to put everything into ships and have that transport across the world, then go to warehouses and logistics, the trucking, and then the last mile. These produce a ton of greenhouse emissions.
Correct.
Not to mention there's just a lot of costs. Now, from a consumer electronics, completely understand that it's about driving down the marginal cost, having high volume runs. But any thoughts around how to move manufacturing capabilities to more local territories and for local consumption to cut down on some of these issues I'm talking about in terms of supply chain and
yeah, for sure. I think we always have thoughts about that, and I'd say that when it comes to some of our displays, things that are a little more heavy and bulky, we do execute those regionally. I think it makes more sense to build those domestically than to try to ship a heavy display from our factory to the end destination. And so we're being a little more conscious about that, being more in market. When we talk about doing something that maybe have a more limited run, we're looking at domestic ways to build the product or customize the product domestically. The issue is that really the supply chain today for any product is purely global. So even though the end product is being assembled in one location, the components are coming from all over the globe, and so that in a sense is still shipping a lot of things across the globe, right? And so we're kind of it's really up to the rest of the industry as well to lead that charge, to be able to make sure components are available in a domestic way so that we can actually produce our products. So I think in general, all the companies are challenged with that. It's a global supply chain today, where it used to be you could have a product fully made in America, for instance, if it was more simple. And so with these electronic products being very complicated, we can't find the components here, right? We have to bring them in. So.
All right. So any one final message for our listeners in terms of, why sustainability is core to the DNA of the House of Marley?
It's critical. Obviously with what's happening today, it's become even more relevant. Marley from the very beginning believed in sustainability, and what we're seeing it being a trend today. We feel very proud that we were, on the front end of that, and we want to continue to lead the industry. Obviously, we're a small fish in a big pond, and we feel that every little thing we do is making a difference, and at least helping tell that story to the market. It might drive innovation at larger companies, and we think that's awesome as well. So we welcome the industry to be changing their mind, right? Because I think it also helps Marley in what we're doing and helps tell that message. We just need to be more unique and tell different stories as the market evolves, so that we're always kind of doing new things and pushing innovation in materials. We're actually very proud of what we've accomplished thus far.
Great. So on that note, I've been joined by Josh Poulsen, who's a Director of Product Development at the House of Marley. Thanks for joining today.
Thanks, Scott.
If you've enjoyed this episode, take a moment to rate our show on any podcast platform that you listen to. Scroll down to the bottom and push 5 stars. It's that easy. And as always, thanks for listening.